Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PFN Fantasy Podcast. I am your host for today, Theo Ash. Alongside me, I have got Kyle Soppe. How you doing, Soppe?
I'm doing well. We're getting close to week 3 here. It feels like the season just got started. We're already on week 3. September's running out of time here. I'm excited. The more information you give me, the more excited I get. And that's the way this goes. We're almost 3 weeks in. That gets me excited. Not that week 1 is a problem, but week 3 is better than week 1, and week 6 is better than week 3.
Nothing reminds me that time marches on more than the NFL season. Just unmercifully, just week after week after week, they roll on so fast. Yeah, hard to believe we're already almost at the end of the first month. We got some injury news to touch on to begin this pod. Tua Tagovailoa officially moved to IR. He'll be out at least a month. No timetable set on his return. They've brought in Snoop Huntley to be the backup to Skylar Thompson. And I guess we touched on this a little bit last week, but how are we feeling about these Dolphins now long-term with, or at least over the next 4 weeks with Tua gone? I know I've got A-Chain in my league, Soppe. I'm worried. Should I be?
Well, I mean, given how they used him last week, I wouldn't be too worried about him. Kind of everybody else is a little worrisome. You mentioned he's going to miss 4 games, which is actually 5 weeks because the bye week's in there. We don't know where this is going to go. There's no guarantee that he's back at all this season. So I think people with Miami Dolphins right now have to live in this world where it's no longer Tua, and we're kind of reading and reacting. We think Tyreek's going to be the go-to option, and he should be fine, like a top 15 guy instead of a top 5 guy. That's kind of splitting hairs. You're starting him either way. Jalen Waddle's the interesting discussion point. We did see his production drop off a cliff without Tua in years past. That's concerning, especially if they're going to load up the running game. Achan's getting a lot of touches. Mostert, whenever he's back, if they go run heavy, I'm not saying they're going to look like the week 2 Packers, but if it's anything that skews that direction and it's not a high pass rate over expectation, Waddle kind of feels like a house of cards that could come crashing down anytime here.
Totally. I was looking at it last night, and Waddle has a less than 100% fantasy points compared to what is expected with Tua out. I think you can maybe explain that a little bit more, but considering the opportunities that he is getting in a non-Tua offense, he's falling short of what the fantasy points he should be getting, which is the complete opposite of what it's like with Tua. He makes the most of his opportunities with the starting quarterback out there. Without it, they have really struggled to get him involved. So I do think that he's probably going to be on my bench for other players like Brian Thomas Jr., honestly, until things get sorted out there. And I'm a little bit worried about these injuries kind of cascading. That's my main thing with A-Chain right now. Like it should be fine for a while, but I'm worried that, he shouldn't be your main weapon. He's a change of pace guy. I think, like, ideally Mostert is the guy you hand the ball off to the most, and then A-Chain is the guy that breaks a couple big ones over the course of the game after things have been worn down. Now he's your answer first, second, and third down. Like, it's only week 2. He's a small guy. He's got these injury concerns. That's what I'm the most worried about. I think maybe we got a week or 2 of insane A-Chain production, but man, it feels a little bit dicey.
Yeah, in a perfect world, you want Mostert to be what Zeke was for the Cowboys and A-Chan to fill that Pollard role. You're not going to get that luxury. I mean, it just by force of nature here, Mostert obviously 32 years old too, so I'm not sure you want to load him down with 24 touches a game. Jalen Wright, I mean, that makes that pick look a little better, I guess, if you're going to go run heavy. I don't see them getting scripted out of many of these games, even with Skylar Thompson or Huntley under center. You look at the Seahawks, the Titans, the Patriots, are their next 3. I don't know if any of those teams are really capable of blowing them out. So if they're going to stay close, run heavy script. It's not going to be the Dolphins of old, but I think they can be productive. The running backs are fine. Tyreek Hill's fine. Like you said, Jalen Waddle, yeesh.
It's rough. I'm hoping for a Bryce Young trade from them. That is the chaos that I want.
Would you prefer him over Huntley at this point? I don't know.
I think I would prefer him over Huntley, but I mean, you're not really saying much. Huntley was just signed off a practice squad. Another piece of news, Isaiah Pacheco officially ruled out for the next several weeks, 6 to 8, I believe I saw. Yep. And they just signed Kareem Hunt. What are your thoughts on this Chiefs backfield now that Hunt has entered the fold?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be a pain, but is he going to be valuable? I don't know. 9 touchdowns last year is obviously noteworthy considering he's going to what we think is going to be one of the best scoring offenses in the league. And realistically, as long as Patrick Mahomes graces this earth. But you've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire can come back in week 5. You've got Samaje Perine. Carson Steele, they seem to like, or at least like enough to get involved. This could be a lot of nothing, if that makes sense. It might be just Andy Reid relies on the pass rate over expectation. Just load up Patrick Mahomes and do with that with what you will. So maybe Travis Kelce sees his stock up a little bit. Rashee Rice already a bona fide star. And I think we know what Xavier Worthy is going to be. He's not 2023 Jamison Williams, but he's pretty darn close. It's not going to be a high volume role, but when he gets the ball, it's going to be exciting. I think both those guys are starting on a weekly basis. Mahomes obviously in. I think every Chief running back deserves to be rostered right now, but I'm not sure you can start any of them.
Yeah, I agree with you. Hunt, the 9 touchdowns is intriguing, but I'm looking at the numbers now. 3 yards per rush last year. I do think that he's not going to be the Kareem Hunt that we've seen in years past. I think when he just kind of shows up and is your lead back and is pretty effective. He's been good for a long time, but he was unsigned for a reason. The Chiefs are familiar with the player, obviously. I think that he's not too much of a threat like it seemed maybe when he first got signed. Let's move on to some of these rankings for specific players as we enter week 3. The first guy that I want to talk about is DeAndre Swift. He is currently running back 38. The Bears have not been able to get him going on the ground much at all, but he's getting a matchup with Indianapolis now, who it might be a free win for you if you have a running back playing Indy. So where do you have him ranked? He's RB38 on the season, like I said. Going into week 3, how much higher is he?
Yeah, you said you wanted to talk about Swift. Do you want to talk about Swift or you want to talk about the Colts matchup here? Because I think that's realistically what we're doing here. I haven't seen anything from this Bears offensive line or their offense as a whole to really give me much in the way of confidence. But in this matchup, I'm going to put him 15 spots higher than his current ranking suggests you should put him. That's fringe running back too, so I think you're starting him in most formats. Listen, he doesn't have a top 30 finish at the position right now, and he's hardly ever going against stacked boxes, a bottom 5 rate in the NFL, and he still can't find any room to go because, A, Caleb Williams isn't threatening defenses at all, and they're not keeping people out of the backfield, even when they have them matched up 1-to-1. Almost 86% of the carries against the Colts have gained yardage. So, I mean, this is... they say that unstoppable force meets the immovable object, or whatever the inverse of that saying is the situation we're at right now. I'm starting Swift. I don't love it, but like you said, it's the Colts. Mixon and Josh Jacobs both cleared 150 rushing yards against them. Even if you only think he gets 2/3 of that, he's reaching triple figures.
Yeah, and I think they can look to get him more involved in the passing game as well. After just 1 target, 0 catches week 1, he was up to 5 and 4 the next week. If Caleb is getting killed back there, there's no other way to put it. You need your running back more involved if he's going to survive the season. You can't be going with 1.3 yards per attempt, 3.0, not a lot of production through the air. They simply have to get him more involved. They signed him to a big contract this offseason. I would really look for him to be a central part of this game plan against the Colts, and they have to get him on track. So I'm with you there. I think that a flex spot for DeAndre Swift this week and kind of a get-right game, I think he can pay it off. I can't – he's been inefficient throughout his career, but I can't imagine like 2.5 yards per touch holds. So
no, especially not in this matchup. Like if we're looking long term, that can be a different discussion. But in this matchup, I think he's an auto play because he's getting the lion's share of the work. He's shown versatility in the past, and we're still not sold that Odunze or Allen are 100% healthy. So if it's just DJ Moore at full health, I think you're right. I think we could see 15 to 17 carries and 5, 6, 7 targets. That's going to be enough, even if he's inefficient. And I think they can score. So if he puts one on the board, maybe he's a top 20 running back.
Yep. Only 2 rushes the past 2 weeks for Khalil Herbert as well. You're not really worried about anybody else threatening. So it's rough, but I think you got to stick with Swift. Next up, we have another kind of struggling running back this year, Kyren Williams. He was a late round 1, early round 2 pick for most people, but he is running back 21 so far this year. He's got a matchup against San Francisco. Soppe, how you feeling about this Rams rushing game and Kyren Williams?
I mean, the Rams offense right now is kind of tough to digest. Obviously, missing both receivers. You've got a quarterback that's pocket locked. So that this isn't feeling like a 2024 offense. I think this thing could look a lot like, I don't know, 1970s offenses. Kyren Williams, as long as they can stay competitive, I think he'll be fine, because this San Fran defense, while very good, if you're giving Kyren Williams 23 touches or something like that, he's going to pay it off. He's scored both weeks, and that's what he does. He scores touchdowns, but he hasn't been better than running back 18 up to this point. I've still got him better than 18 this week, which means he's in starting lineups without much of a concern, and that's more of a statement on the state of the running back position than it is my confidence in Kyren Williams. Up to this point, through 2 weeks, he's been tackled at or behind the line of scrimmage more often than he's had a gain of 5+ yards. That's a problem, unless you're getting crazy volume, which I think he's going to get crazy volume. This feels like a boring retro Derrick Henry game where it's like, oh, if he scores, great. If not, 22 for 82 really isn't that appealing.
Yeah, it's been rough, but we have not seen any of Blake Corum recently. I wonder if they're almost like, hey, if Kyren's not getting any yards, Corum certainly won't, right? So they're just handing it off. Last week, I thought the Cardinals did a phenomenal job fitting the run. Buda Baker would come in from his high safety spot and plant him in the back. It happened at least 3 times. So I wonder if the San Francisco run defense will actually be a little bit lighter than what Arizona was doing, because they were just playing so well. And I think with Kyren overall, I do think he can get better and better as the year goes on here. Puka hurt, Kupp hurt, offensive linemen suspended and banged up. This Rams offense is behind the 8 ball right now. They're 0-2. It sucks, but I think you got to hold on to him. And as the year goes on, the conditions will become a little bit more favorable for Williams, because I don't think that unless Stafford goes down, the offense has nowhere to go but up in terms of injuries. But I guess I don't know. But it's tough to bench him already when he scored 2 touchdowns and you invested such a high pick in him. So, yeah, I think there's not too much to say about it outside of that. So let's move on to the controversial J.K. Dobbins here on this podcast. Hey, he was amazing yet again versus the Carolina Panthers, paid off a long touchdown where they stretched it out to the outside. Everybody just hooked the right side of the Panthers line. There was nobody there. He put on some weird move running up the sideline, and he's still not trusting that speed to get him in, but he kind of hesitated, then moved back to the sideline, flipped into the end zone. It's good that he's got the athleticism to do a front flip, but not to run straight by somebody. But he is ridiculous so far this year. Looking at his yards before contact per rush, it's pretty unprecedented right now. He's finding ways to avoid people in the backfield. The Chargers offensive line is getting pushed. Gus Edwards is not elusive whatsoever. So has your heart softened at all on J.K. Dobbins, or is this all just part of the plan, and now's the time when it all comes crashing down a little bit?
I mean, the matchup against the Steelers certainly isn't optimistic here. It's a tough matchup, but like you said about Gus Edwards, I have no confidence that people are taking touches off of J.K. Dobbins' plate right now. Gus Edwards looks stuck in the mud because that's who Gus Edwards is. This offense doesn't want to throw the ball. Justin Herbert has almost as many completions this season as he averaged per game last September. So, I mean, you're looking at a complete flip in offensive structure. J.K. Dobbins, yeah, he's a starting running back. I mean, it is what it is. I've got him inside my top 20, and I know I've been slow on the come up, and I'm going to continue to be, because he's one carry away from being done for the season. I mean, I hate to say it like that, and we can't predict injury, but for J.K. Dobbins, we kind of can. I think Gus Edwards is going to continue to eat away at the carries, even if it's not efficient. It's just going to be a process standpoint that you don't want to load Dobbins down with carries on a consistent basis. The Chargers third right now in rush rate over expectation. I think that's here to stay as long as they stay competitive. And the Steelers aren't going to blow anybody out. They're 2-0. They haven't scored 20 points in a game yet. So this is a fine spot. I think you're looking at a little bit more of a tepid box score here. He's the first guy to start a season with 230-yard game since work done. Like, it's been a minute. I don't think he makes it 3 in a row, but I think he is productive because of the volume, because we know he's talented. That's never been a knock on him. I still have my questions if he can sustain this, if the Chargers can continue to play this kind of way. But for week 3, I think you're fine.
Yeah, I really don't hate the sell him really high strategy, although I do think that everything is kind of falling into place for him. I am worried about this matchup versus the Steelers.
Sure.
They will load the box. Bare fronts. They have a really good defensive line. Hayward has been a beast against the run so far. Obviously, you got to run from TJ Watt and into him. Landon Roberts and Patrick Queen are a decent linebacker duo up top, and they'll play one high as well. So when you're back there as a quarterback and you're looking at that look, it would behoove you, I think, to check into more passes. I think that this one is going to be more on the arm of Justin Herbert these last 2 weeks. They really haven't had to worry playing the Panthers. And who did they play week 1? The Raiders. So I do think this is going to be more on Herbert to win this game than just like Dobbins. You can bet on him to eventually break a 50-yarder or something like that. But he does have a lot of wiggle. He does have good vision. He does have good balance. It's really just that super high-end speed that you're missing, but it hasn't prevented him from breaking off these long runs because of the other skills that he has. I don't think he's going to get to 100 yards in this game. I'll say that. But I don't know. I think that he's still a decent option. But yeah, it is a little. These huge games are slightly tough to bet on now.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing here. We don't think he's going to get to 100 yards rushing. He's not overly involved in the passing game, and there's not going to be many touchdowns here. So really, how is he getting home if he's not checking any of those boxes? I think as crazy as it sounds for a guy that's been as explosive as anybody, I think the ceiling is significantly capped in matchups like this.
Yeah, and I love J.K. Dobbins, but I agree. I think it's going to be a bit tougher sledding versus Pittsburgh. The interior of this Chargers offensive line, not great. All right, you can say what you want about Alt and Slater, but I don't fully believe that this is a roster yet that can just fully ground and pound their way through a season like Michigan could, right? So, yeah. Wide receivers, we have got a couple guys to talk about, starting with Calvin Ridley versus Green Bay, coming off a huge week last week. But Levis has been Jameis Winston with more picks and less touchdowns somehow. And but you never know what that could mean. Is it going to be a big week where he just lights it up, or is it going to be a week where he's turning it over? Like, he is a bit of a wild card in terms of production for these wide receivers. How are you feeling about Calvin Ridley going forward? Do you like the volume? Are you worried about Levis? Where are you at?
I think a bit of a wild card might be as tepid as you could possibly make that statement. You made the Jameis Winston cop for Will Levis, and I like that. I think he's like Josh Allen, but without talent. Like, there's just the reckless nature, and that's what it reminds me of, early Josh Allen, where we were having these spike games all over the place, and even spike plays. Like, I'm not sure he can sustain strong play or weak play over the course of 15 minutes, let alone 60, and get you home here. Calvin Ridley, you mentioned the big game last week. He was wide receiver 46 in week 1, wide receiver 7 in week 2. Good luck trying to pin the tail on that as we go here. I'm not betting on it this week, specifically against the Jordan Loveless Packers right now that are just going to sit on the ball and control the clock. Like, they're not a fun team to watch. I know they're both of our favorite teams, but they're not going to put the ball in harm's way. They're not going to give Levis a chance to out-volume his mistakes. If he makes a mistake, it means you're not touching the ball for another 8 to 10 minutes. Yep. And that's going to be a problem for Ridley, who leads the league in air yards. I would say that could certainly sustain, but a lot of that is going to be useless, for lack of a better way. He has been in the slot a career high over 25% of the time. So I do like to see that from a long-term standpoint. For this week, though, he's outside my top 30.
His pass chart is hilarious right now. Looking at where these targets came from so far this year, he has 4 targets at or around 40 yards down the field. Okay. They are calling 4 verts. I don't know what they're calling, but it is just bomb it down the field to Ridley up the sideline. He only has 3 targets, 5 yards and under. Okay. That's usually the opposite problem. I feel like when I talk about heat maps and charts, I'm always saying like, oh, there's nothing beyond 10. There's nothing beyond 5. It's all just this short and intermediate stuff. It is very, very rare that I say, oh, it's all beyond 40. They need to dial it back and get him the ball underneath at So with Jair Alexander probably following him around in
Yeah.
this new half lease scheme, and the fact that if he's catching balls, the degree of difficulty is like insanely high. I don't think that you should start him. I think it's going to be a little bit rough.
Yeah, and especially you would think DeAndre Hopkins starting to work his way back. He's only run 27 routes this season, but with him at less than full strength, like you said, Alexander on Ridley, and just the Packers holding the ball, that I can't. It's going to have to be a very efficient, very aberrational day for Ridley to get home, and those aren't two words I like to use around a Levis target.
He'll need a big one. He'll need like an AJ Brown in week 1, right? Just win that man coverage battle just once. He can do it. He can separate, but
talented.
You're kind of playing the slots. He either breaks the 70-yard touchdown or he doesn't, I think, because there's not going to be many opportunities. Moving on to Michael Pittman versus Chicago. He has really struggled this year, but he's been a beast. He's put up numbers. You mentioned it before the season in our trivia question that no one has really been as consistent as him. Do you think he can get back to that level of consistency that he's put on tape and put on the box scores so many years in a row, or are you kind of starting to hit the panic button here with Michael Pittman?
I'm panicking in a big way. The reason he was in that trivia question was because I was higher than everybody on him. I think I was dead wrong. I'm willing to bend the knee and take that L. Here we are 2 weeks into the season. He hasn't been a top 50 receiver once. Top 50. That's not a high bar to clear in a 32-team league where there's like 6 quarterbacks that are dead upon arrival. Like, this is a problem. You're the tape guy. You tell me. This skill set matchup is just a completely misfit for what Anthony Richardson wants to do. Richardson wants to have short drives, hit the big play, score touchdowns like that. Michael Pittman wants to move the chains. It's 3rd and 6. Give me 7. I'm a catch and run for the extra 3. That's not how he's going to get there. That trivia question had a lot of volume stats in it, had a lot of efficiency. I don't see a world in which any of that is possible with the way Anthony Richardson's stretching the field right now.
I think that Michael Pittman is a bit of a volume merchant these past few years. I think that on tape, I don't always love the speed that he plays at. I do think he kind of takes his sweet time to get open at times. And with him and Richardson, the timing just hasn't been there. I think Richardson is attempting a lot of risky passes, honestly. Like he's looking down the field when he shouldn't. I'd honestly like to see him scramble more instead of attempting some of the passes that he does or look more underneath the Pittman, but it's just not his game right now. And Josh Downs is about to come back, who I think is the underneath target that he actually likes. And I've seen a good connection with them. I've seen more kind of that chemistry, right? That like inherent knowledge of what the other is going to do in the preseason games, in the small sample size we've seen together. Like Downs is that possession threat, while also being able to stretch the field vertically a little bit, that I actually like with Richardson here. Pittman just feels like the odd man out here. I really didn't like him before this season, and I don't like him now after this showing these first 2 weeks. So I'm definitely hitting the panic button on him. If you could trade him right now, I would do it.
Yeah, you're gonna need a big performance to do that, which could happen because anything can happen in an Anthony Richardson-led offense. But I've got my rankings up here. You tell me. We going Jackson, Smith, Najigba this week against the Dolphins, or do you want Michael Pittman?
Oh, easily JSN, especially when Pittman is playing Chicago, who might have the best secondary in all of football. So there should be keeping the ball on the ground as much as humanly possible. Pittman is still probably the guy you double and bracket if you're in this offense and make maybe somebody else beat you, because right now there isn't a ton of other there's none of these Colts wide receivers are really lighting it up. So Pittman is still facing the double teams while not having the chemistry, while going up against a great secondary. I'm taking basically anybody. I really do not see the path here unless he scores a touchdown.
Fair enough.
The last disappointing name that we have to talk about and see if maybe he can bounce back. We got Amari Cooper versus the New York Giants.
Yeah, if we're stacking these guys up against one another, it's Cooper with a bullet for me. I mean, he's wide receiver 95 this year. He's been awfully inefficient. He's been terrible, but I'm willing to erase those first 2 weeks, understanding that he gets the Giants this week. Like, it really is that simple. I still think he's a talented player. Deshaun Watson, I don't think he looked good last week, but he looked a little bit better than he did in week 1. That's a step forward. If you're going to take positive vibes into a matchup against the Giants, I will take my chances. Amari Cooper's ADOT right now, his lowest since joining the Browns, and that should result in some efficiency that we just haven't seen up to this point. But where he lines up on the field is where I'm going with this, and why he's flirting with the top 20 in my ranks right now. Opponents are 20 of 23 when throwing to the perimeter against the Giants. 20 of 23. That's higher than my high school GPA. That's a big number. And Cooper's out there over 70% of the time since joining the Browns. So if he's going to be efficient, I have no doubt that they're going to try him down the field and get him looks. So if those 8 to 10 targets turn into 6 to 8 catches, you're talking about a guy that can do some serious damage. He's going to be on my DFS radar, and I'll probably be overweight. I will probably have too much invested in this offense this week to be comfortable. But hey, you got to gamble somewhere. The Browns offense is where I'm doing it.
I mean, they have to make it work up the sideline with him. He has not caught a single pass up the side, but like outside the numbers all year. He caught one that was at 4 yards of depth.
He's caught like 3 passes this year.
Yeah, you're right. It's nowhere has worked. But I mean, this is your deep threat. This is the guy who's supposed to stretch the field for you. We know he can do it at a high level. He did it with Joe Flacco last year. He had maybe the best receiving game of the millennium against the Texans last year. It was crazy. It's not that far removed. So I think he has it within him. They're trying to target him in those places. They just haven't been able to connect. I do think that this week, I mean, if the Browns want to do anything, Amari Cooper has to be involved, and this is the week where it has to work. So I agree with you. Watson is pretty terrible, but Amari Cooper is good. This is a soft defense to go up against. And I think that you can bet on some positive regression here. I mean, the level that it hasn't worked, it's not going to be like that all season. It can't be. So I'm with you.
Yeah, no, I would agree there. You've got Jalen Waddle, Tank Dell, Amari Cooper, guys in that general neighborhood. Tank Dell, obviously the maybe third or second option in an explosive offense. Waddle, the number 2 in an offense that we think is going to be a little more tepid. How do you stack those guys up for week 3?
Tank Dell, Waddle,
Tank Dell, Waddle, and Amari Cooper. Waddle's got the Seahawks. Tank Dell has, why can I not? He's got Minnesota. So you're talking viable matchups across the board. Cooper, his team's number 1 receiver in a good spot. Are you playing him over number 2s and objectively better offenses?
I think I'm taking Waddle over him as much as I say it has to positively regress. I think Watson is just so bad, and Waddle, I think, can hit a slant and take it away. So I think I would go Waddle. I think I would go Cooper next, and then Dell I'd put at number 3, perhaps. I think Flores is maybe Nico is the guy that he brackets, and this is a little bit more of a Tank Dell game, but the defense has been so good for Minnesota, and Tank Dell just hasn't been involved enough that I think I would go Waddle, Cooper, Dell, but that's a tough one. That's a tough one to rank.
I've got Cooper and Waddle flipped in your ranks, and Dell's 3rd for me as well.
Okay. So at least we agree on that. Yep. Moving on to the quarterback position. Are you worried about Dak Prescott at all at this point? He's quarterback 16. You were hoping that would be more of MVP level play from him like he had last year, but haven't seen it so far. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you have to be worried about him. I don't think this Ravens defense is going to get shredded like they did against Gardner Minshew. Like, I think that was aberrational. So the matchup isn't ideal. Dak Prescott doesn't use his legs. I mean, he's got 3 carries this season, and we've kind of seen that wane off with time. So you're looking at a pocket-locked quarterback in a tough matchup without much in the way of depth at receiver. You've got CeeDee Lamb. I understand he's great. 65-yard touchdown, stop, go, all that stuff. He's phenomenal. He might be the best in the game. Justin Jefferson could ask questions, but whatever. He's one of the top 5 in the game. But outside of that, like I haven't loved what I've seen from Brandon Cooks. Jalen Tolbert made a nice play last week, but that's hit and miss at best. Jake Ferguson expected to be back, and I think that's kind of where we settle with Prescott's status. He hasn't been a top 15 quarterback once this season. I've got him right on that fringe this week. I don't love it. I'm not going this direction very often. If I can avoid it, I'm going to. Obviously, if you draft a 1 quarterback, you might not have that option. But I think a lot of people are going to go back to Prescott with confidence, thinking that the Ravens just blew a lead to the Raiders, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But guys like Baker, guys like Derek Carr, the hot guys to start the season, I'm going to start them over Dak. I have it ranked that way, and that's how I would do it if you picked up one of them off the wire and you have them and Prescott on your roster.
I think I'm a little bit more optimistic than you. I think the Saints and the Browns are really tough defenses to go up against. I kind of am liking what I'm seeing out of Jalen Tolbert, and obviously CD can cook at any time. With Ferguson back, I think that there are going to be enough weapons. And what I saw from the Raiders at the end of the game last week let me know, like, hey, you can kind of pick on this Raiders defense a little bit through the air. They were playing there too high. They were playing zone coverage, and Minshew was kind of picking them apart as long as guys were kind of running the right routes and he had some time to throw. It wasn't happening in the first half. They got absolutely annihilated, but they did sort of settle in and pick apart this Ravens defense at the end. I do think that if Dak has the full display of or array of weapons at his disposal, it can be like that from start to finish. I think this can be a bounce back game for him. I think he's not going to be this bad all year. Starting a rookie lineman at left tackle, maybe that starts to get a little better as the year goes on. I just think that he's been so consistent for such a long time now that two bad matchups versus good defenses doesn't have to be the way it is the whole time. I think he can bounce back and get a top 10 finish here. But I mean, usually with quarterbacks, it's not like you're keeping people on the bench to an insane extent. So if you have Dak, you're kind of stuck with him most likely. I do think, though, that it's not completely over for his fantasy season. I know he can't run. I know that it's a little bit thin, but it was a little bit thin last year. It was a little, it was very CD heavy. He wasn't scoring rushing touchdowns a lot last year. He still finished really high. I do think that this Cowboys offense can't reach those levels again if they face defenses that are a little bit less locked in to begin the year. We'll see about Baltimore so far, but last but not least, we got the tight ends. In our rundown here, we don't really have too many guys who are disappointing to talk about or ranked to talk about. Is there anybody that you're especially high on this week? I'll ask you that.
I was high on Ferguson coming into the year, and I think he's going to continue to be viable. So if my Dak hate loses, I think it's because Ferguson wins. So I'm hedging my bet there. One of these things will happen. I think it's probably unlikely that Ferguson has a big day and Dak struggles, but I do like Ferguson more than most. I've got this Baltimore tight end situation, man. You're going to have them rostered, but I don't know how you can play either with confidence. I've got all three tight ends in this game ranked between 8 and 12, and that's kind of no man's land. Like, at the tight end position, it's the haves and have-nots, and the haves is running low. Like, Travis Kelce, one catch last week, not confident on him. Brock Bowers has elevated into that must-start status, but Dalton Kincaid's been underwhelming. Sam Laporta's been underwhelming. Trey McBride's been great. George Kittle, I think, should thrive with Debo out, McCaffrey out. But outside of the top tier, which is now like 3 people, it gets ugly in a hurry. I think you're streaming the position. In that vein, I think you could do worse than any of the guys in this game. Mike Gesicki came on last week for the Bengals. I think he might be their slot receiver for right now, and that's going to get the job done. They didn't look anywhere outside of the tight end position. So I think you're streaming the position if you need to. I don't have much confidence in anybody. If you get 60 yards, you're a top 10 tight end. Like, that's the nature of the position right now. So lower your expectations. But if you have a tight end in this Dallas-Baltimore game, I'm playing him.
One guy that I like this week, maybe Zach Ertz, if you're looking for somebody to kind of stream. He's someone that I actually drafted in one of my leagues, and he's kind of paid off. We have seen Jaden Daniels not really look to the wide receivers too much at all. It kind of seems to be look at the first read and then maybe take the check down, which a lot of the times is a running back or a tight end. He's going up against a Cincinnati defense that they just kind of shut down Travis Kelce, but at this point, that might be more of a Travis Kelce thing. I don't know. But I think that Ertz has kind of emerged as the most trusted weapon that the Commanders have. This Cincy defense doesn't have a lot of star power. The Washington offense, they have been moving up and down the field pretty easily. They haven't really been scoring a lot of touchdowns. Yeah. But if they're getting to the red zone consistently and your tight end is your top weapon, I am willing to bet like eventually Ertz scores a touchdown or outperforms what really is no hype, right? He is not a top 10 tight end in fantasy football. You could probably still pick him up on waivers in a lot of leagues. So he's someone that I kind of have my eye on as a good pickup this year, even though he's old. Cliff Kingsbury has a lot of trust in him. He's a starter. You're not really seeing much of Ben Sinnott, who everybody was worried about preseason, but he's a rookie tight end, kind of buried on the depth chart. We're probably not going to see him much all year unless there's an injury. Agreed. So I kind of like the Zach Ertz play this year.
I like that call. They're not stretching the field at all. Kingsbury's just going side to side here, and I think that's how Ertz wins. He's not going to win vertically. You mentioned the red zone trips. They're right now third in the league in red zone trips, and they can't score. They're behind only the Lions and Eagles, but they can't push it across. So I don't mind that call from you. Let's get to another boring tight end. If you've got Ertz or you've got a star from week 2, Hunter Henry, on Thursday night, going against a very tough matchup in the Jets, who would you play, Ertz or Henry?
I think I'd play Henry just because the Jets are dealing with some volume, and then the Jets are dealing with some injuries at the linebacker position. Mosley has been banged up. They don't have the greatest safety duo, I'd say. So I do think that there's a chance they lean on Henry, and maybe there's some matchups to be played there. I think I would go with Henry over Ertz, but I kind of am high on Henry. I have him in a couple leagues as well. So I kind of going into it, I felt pretty good about him. And then after the week he just had, I'd take Henry over a lot of guys, I think.
Yeah, that's how I have it ranked. But I do think both are viable down the board options and DFS options if you're going that way.
Sweet. Any, that's all the skill position talent that we have to talk about. Any streaming deep? Do you do defense? We haven't talked one bit about now that I'm the host and can control this. What about the kicker and defense rankings, huh?
I mean, kicker, I'm not going to give you much. If you got a kicker, you're playing him. Play indoor kickers, all that good stuff. The Steelers' profile is a good real life defense, but I'm not sure they're going to offer a lot of fantasy points because the Chargers don't want to put the ball in harm's way. They don't want to give that defense an opportunity to produce points. So if you're looking for a fantasy bust, I think the Steelers kind of struggle. On the flip side of that, the Buccaneers. The Bucs, for me, are going to be my DFS defense all over the place. They're the team I picked up to stream. I don't think they're a very good defense, but they can stop the run, and that means Bo Nix is throwing the ball a lot. If you give me 35 Bo Nix attempts, I'll take PFN's finest 11 defenders and take my chances with them, let alone a professional defense. So I think the Bucs, they're cheap at DFS. They're on a lot of waiver wires. To me, they're the streaming defense you want to target in week 3.
Yeah, no, I love that call. I think that they could really cause some havoc because they held the Lions to only 16 points last week, and they played a ton of middle of the field closed zone coverage. And I thought the way that they were playing within their zones was pretty great. Zion McCollum really struggled in the past, but he came in as their starting corner and played fantastic last week. Same with Christian Izzian. Same with Whitehead, the safety. Like, those guys were just on one, distributing the routes. And right now, Bo Nix can't read coverage. Okay, he can't read coverage. Okay, so if you've got a team that can disguise and play really disciplined zone, Bo Nix has been Bo Picks over the past few games. I think this could be an especially bad matchup for him. So that is super juicy. You're absolutely right. So with that being said, I think that will wrap up another episode of the PFN Fantasy Podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening if you haven't already. Follow me at Theo NFL on Twitter and TikTok. Soppe, where can they find you? I'm not totally aware of your handle.
That's okay. Kyle Soppe PFN. We keep it simple there on the old Twitter machine. We put up the quarterback rankings. We bring the feedback. We encourage the heat. I've got a grading system. Bring it. I'm happy to do that. Happy to answer start-sit questions as well as we near week 3.
Excellent. So that'll do it for this episode. See y'all later.
We'll be right back.